My name is Amara Lewis. I'm 17 years old, a senior at Millbrook High, and a black belt in mixed martial arts. Back in Detroit, people knew better than to mess with me, but here no one knew my story. They just saw another quiet black girl trying to keep her head down. I never planned to stand out at this new school. My only goal was to survive senior year quietly and make my mom proud. But life doesn't care about your plans. Because on my very first day at Millbrook High, I found myself standing alone in a cafeteria full of strangers while a boy named Derek Morrison told me I had to pay him protection money to stay safe. That was the moment everything changed. I still heard Derek's laughter echoing in my head as I walked to class. Every fluorescent light above felt like a spotlight exposing my weakness, something I couldn't afford, not here, not anywhere. That morning, I woke before my alarm staring at the ceiling of my new bedroom in Millbrook, feeling like a ghost drifting through someone else's life. Back in Detroit, I knew who I was. 8 years of MMA training had burned discipline into my bones, each jab, cross hook, uppercut flowing as naturally as breath. But here I felt caged, forced to keep my claws hidden. Before sunrise, I'd gone down to the basement where Mom set up my heavy bag, hitting it for 40 minutes straight until sweat dripped onto the concrete floor, every punch landing with the weight of everything I wanted to say but couldn't. Everything I wanted to scream into Derek's face, but I didn't. I just wiped my hands, ate toast with Mom, and walked out the door like any other teenage girl trying to survive high school. Survival here didn't mean getting good grades. It meant being invisible. And I tried. God, I tried. Until lunch came and Derek Morrison, with his perfect Letterman jacket and ice blue eyes, decided I looked like someone he could break. New students pay a welcome fee, he said, voice dripping casual cruelty. Call it insurance. The cafeteria went silent as I set down my tray, my heart calm despite the adrenaline roaring in my veins. I don't pay protection money. For a moment, his smile faltered before returning darker. Everyone pays, easy or hard. I picked up my tray and walked past him, feeling his glare burn holes in my back. That should have been the end, but bullies don't let things go. The next day, gum jammed in my locker, my notes stolen, and mocked a banana taped to my locker with "Welcome to the Jungle" scrawled above. Then came the edited recording he played in study hall, twisting my words into poison. Some believed it. Some pitied me. Marcus warned me softly. Don't do anything stupid. He wants you to snap. But I wasn't planning to snap. I was planning to end it. After school, I walked to the parking lot where Derek and his crew laughed, celebrating their victory. They thought they'd broken me, stripped me of dignity, and left me silent. But silence is just calm before the storm. I dropped my backpack on the curb and walked toward them, each step heavy with purpose, like the earth itself held me steady. Well, well, Derek sneered. Look who finally grew a spine. I stopped 10 feet away, met his eyes, and spoke calmly. I'm done with your games. The fake recording, the threats, it ends now. He laughed, sharp and barking. And what are you gonna do? Call your mommy? I didn't answer. I shifted my stance, feet, light fists loose at my sides. The wind tugged at my braids, whispering, do it, show them. The moment he reached for me, everything slowed. Training took over. I twisted out of his grip, grabbed his wrist, slammed my elbow into his solar plexus. He collapsed with a grunt as air whooshed from his lungs. Jake lunged, next big mistake. I swept his leg, sent him crashing to the asphalt. Tommy froze, eyes wide with animal fear. Derek staggered up, blood trickling from his nose. You think you're tough? He gasped. No, I said, stepping closer, voice quiet as steel. I know I am. He swung at me wildly, rage blinding his technique, but I wasn't there when his fist cut air. I was already behind him, sweeping his knee, dropping him to the ground again, his face smashing against the pavement with a sickening crack. Silence rippled through the lot as students gathered their eyes wide with shock and hope. I knelt beside him, pressing my knee between his shoulder blades as he wheezed for breath. "Are we done?" I asked. "Get off me," he gasped. "Are we done?" I repeated, pressing harder. "Yeah, we're done." I stood up and looked around at all the silent witnesses. I saw Layla Brown standing at the edge of the crowd, her eyes wide with something close to awe. Beside her, Amani Reed clutched her phone with trembling hands, recording every second. I picked up my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, my pulse steady, my breaths calm. This wasn't rage. This was justice. As I walked back into the school, I could still hear Derek groaning behind me. For the first time since arriving in Millbrook, I felt the ground solid beneath my feet, because sometimes survival isn't enough. Sometimes you have to show them you're not prey. You're the storm they never saw coming. People say fighting solves nothing, that violence only breeds more violence. Maybe they're right. But that day, as I walked away from Derek Morrison bleeding on the asphalt, I didn't feel powerful. I felt free. But freedom is never simple. By lunch the next day, the video had spread like wildfire. It wasn't just students whispering anymore. Teachers paused mid-lesson to glance at me with a mix of fear and curiosity. In the cafeteria, conversations stopped when I walked in. Some kids nodded at me with silent respect. Others scooted away like I carried a disease. But none of that mattered, because for the first time since Detroit, no one tried to touch me. Until I heard the voice behind me. "Hey, Amara, right?" I turned to see a girl I vaguely recognized from chemistry class. Long braids, soft brown eyes, voice like trembling glass. "Layla Brown," she said, hugging her binder to her chest like a shield. Can I sit with you?" I nodded. She sat across from me, avoiding my eyes. For a long moment, we just ate in silence. Finally, she whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For fighting back, for showing them you're not afraid." I didn't tell her the truth, that I was afraid, that every step I took felt like walking barefoot on shattered glass. Because the thing no one tells you about standing up is that the moment you do, you become a target. Bullies don't like losing control. They find new ways to break you. That afternoon, I found out how. As I walked to my locker, my phone buzzed with notifications. Dozens of messages, tags, reposts. My stomach twisted as I opened the first one. It was a video. My voice played over fuzzy audio words I'd never said, strung together in a toxic monologue about white students and how I planned to hurt them. I froze, staring at the screen as bile rose in my throat. Another edit, another attack. Behind me, I heard the snickers first. Then Derek's voice, nasal and mocking. "Looks like the little savage has some explaining to do." I turned. He stood there with a bandage across his broken nose, but his smirk was as confident as ever. Jake and Tommy flanked him, bruises still fresh, but eyes gleaming with cruel delight. "Nice video," Jake sneered. "You really think you can come into our school and start shit without consequences?" I said nothing. There was nothing to say. Because this was the real fight. Not fists, not kicks. This was reputation, truth twisted into lies, isolation forged like iron bars around me. No martial arts combination could break this cage. As I closed my locker, Derek leaned close enough that I smelled mint gum and blood. "This isn't Detroit," he whispered. "Here, I make the rules. And tomorrow, you're done." For the first time in years, I felt my hands shake. I walked to class on numb feet. My biology teacher's voice blurred into meaningless hums. All I could think was, they're going to destroy me. And what's worse, they might succeed. After school, as I stepped into the late autumn air, Layla was waiting by the bike racks. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. Next to her stood another girl I didn't recognize. Dark curls, fierce eyes. "This is Amani Reed," Layla said. "She saw the video too. We know it's fake. We wanted you to know that." Amani stepped forward. People like Derek, they count on everyone staying quiet. but not everyone's afraid of him. Some of us see exactly what he is. I searched her face, expecting pity, but found only steel. For the first time that day, something like warmth flickered in my chest. "Thank you," I said. Amani shrugged. "Don't thank me yet. There's something else." "What?" "They're planning something. Derek and the Riverside crew. My cousins in their group chat. They're gonna press charges. Say you attacked them. Say you're dangerous." A cold, hollow ache bloomed in my chest. They can't do that. There's video. Witnesses. Amani shook her head. "Doesn't matter. Derek's dad has connections. They'll twist it. Make you look like the aggressor." My vision narrowed to a single point in the fading light. I felt 8 years of training settle into my bones. Calm, centered, focused. "Let them try," I whispered. Amani blinked. "What?" "Let them try. Because I'm done hiding. I'm done surviving. If they want to fight, they'll get one. But it won't be the kind they expect." As I walked home that evening, I felt something shift inside me. A quiet surrender, not to them, but to the truth of who I was. I was not prey. I was not a girl to be broken or erased. I was a weapon honed by discipline and pain, a storm waiting for the right sky to split open. And tomorrow they would see exactly what they had unleashed. I always thought Derek Morrison was just another bully born from privilege, another golden boy who needed to crush someone smaller to feel big. But that day, when I pinned him to the asphalt knee, pressing between his shoulders, I saw his eyes up close for the first time. And what I saw wasn't rage or hate. It was terror. Pure, childlike terror. The way his breath came in short, ragged gasps, the way his body trembled under mine. It wasn't just fear of me. It was fear of something far older, something that had been beating him down long before I ever threw a punch. For a split second, the world around us blurred, and I saw him not as my tormentor, but as a boy cowering in the shadow of someone bigger, someone who taught him that violence was love and cruelty was power. And in that moment, something inside me twisted with disgust and pity all at once. Because I realized if I broke him now, I would become exactly what I'd spent my life training to fight against. If I destroyed him completely, I'd just be continuing the same cycle that forged monsters like him. But I also knew mercy wouldn't save me. Mercy wouldn't protect Layla Brown or Imani Reed or any other girl who'd ever walked these halls with their eyes down and their hearts trembling. So I pressed my knee harder into his back, leaned down close to his ear, and whispered, "I see what they did to you, but I'm not your punching bag, and I won't let you become theirs either." Then I stood up and walked away, leaving him there on the ground with his tears hidden in the dust, wondering if I'd just saved him or destroyed him forever. I never meant to become a symbol. That was never the plan. After everything that happened with Derek, I thought the storm would finally pass. I thought I'd walk away bruised but intact, and life would settle back into its quiet rhythm of early alarms, late homework, and the steady loneliness of being invisible. But it didn't. It only grew louder. The video spread before I even made it home that day. By dinner, it was everywhere, me standing in the fading bus stop, sunlight, fists clenched, body loose, eyes cold and steady as I told Derek's crew to back off. Comments flooded in faster than I could read them. Some called me violent, dangerous, a thug. Others called me brave, a hero, a queen. But when I watched that video, all I saw was my own face, calm and detached, as if I'd stepped outside my body and was watching from somewhere far away. I didn't see a hero. I saw a girl holding herself together with discipline and sheer will, terrified that if she let even one emotion slip, she'd shatter beyond repair. The next morning, something strange happened. As I walked through the front doors of Millbrook High, the noisy hallways fell quiet, not with mockery or fear, but with something else. Respect, curiosity, even hope. 2 freshman girls stood by my locker clutching their binders to their chests like armor. Their eyes were wide and uncertain, their voices trembling when they spoke. "Amara, could you teach us?" "Not to fight, but just so we're not scared anymore." I looked at them and saw myself at 14. Small, quiet, trying to fold myself invisible so no one would notice because being noticed meant getting hurt. In that moment, something shifted inside me like a door opening onto a room I'd forgotten existed. A quiet knowing settled into my bones. Maybe all those years of training weren't just for survival. Maybe they were for this. That afternoon, I cleared a corner of the gym and told them to meet me there. 5 kids showed up the first day. We practiced simple things: how to stand balanced, how to keep your chin tucked, how to breathe when fear claws at your ribs and your vision tunnels into darkness. The next day, there were 12. The day after that, 23. By the end of the week, 60 students crowded into that dusty space. Kids who used to flinch when their names were called. Kids who sat alone at lunch tracing invisible words onto plastic trays. Kids who learned to keep their eyes down because looking up invited danger. Now they stood taller shoulders, back eyes steady, learning how to hold their ground. At the center of them was Imani Reed. She showed up every single day, her curls tied back, tight eyes blazing with something fierce and unbreakable. She wasn't there just to learn. She was there to lead beside me. She echoed every move I taught her, voice strong as she counted reps aloud, encouraging the ones who broke down crying when their bodies wouldn't listen, reminding me in those dark moments when the weight felt too heavy why this mattered. One afternoon, as the late sun poured molten orange light through the high windows, I watched them move together in unison, jab, cross, hook, uppercut. The sounds of fists hitting pads and sneakers squeaking against worn hardwood rose and fell like a heartbeat in that silent gym. And for the first time in so long, tears burned behind my eyes, hot and unstoppable. Because in that moment, I didn't feel like prey or predator. I didn't feel like the angry girl from Detroit or the quiet nobody from Millbrook. I felt like something bigger. Something stronger. A bridge between fear and freedom. A promise that no one had to stand alone. But deep down, I knew nothing good comes without a cost. Every day the club grew, so did the eyes watching us. Derek's glare burned hotter across the cafeteria. Teachers started whispering in the staff lounge, and the administration. They didn't like it. They didn't like how students who used to walk with their heads down now walked like they owned the ground beneath their feet. They didn't like how fear was leaving us and turning into something they couldn't control, because a student who knows how to stand up stops being easy to silence. And in the back of my mind, a voice whispered like a cold wind curling around my ribs, "This isn't over. This is just the beginning." And as I watched Imani correct a girl's stance with firm, gentle hands, as I listened to the chorus of punches striking pads in perfect rhythm, I felt a quiet certainty settle deep into my bones. If they wanted a war, they had just found one. Because I wasn't fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every kid who ever felt their voice die in their throat. For every girl who walked the halls praying to stay invisible. For every boy who learned too young that silence was safer than speaking truth. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't a queen. I was a storm. And tomorrow they would see exactly what it meant to stand in my way. They couldn't beat me with fists, so they changed tactics. It started with whispers. I'd walk into the cafeteria and feel eyes on me, hear my name slip off tongues like poison. "She's dangerous. She thinks she's better than everyone. Did you hear what she did to Derek and those Riverside guys unprovoked? Psycho." At first I ignored it. Words were easy to brush off, but then Marcus pulled me aside after class, his face pale. "They're planning something," he said in a low voice. Derek, Brad Matthews from Riverside and their crews, they're working together. I overheard them in the library. I frowned. Working together, how they're going to the police, filing assault charges against you, saying you attacked them without reason. For a moment, the world blurred around me. The floor felt unsteady under my feet. That's ridiculous, I said, my voice sounding far away. There's video, witnesses. Everyone saw what happened. Marcus shook his head slowly. Doesn't matter. Derek's dad has connections everywhere, school board, local judges, cops. They're going to twist it, Amara. Make you look like some violent thug who snapped. I swallowed the acid rising in my throat. Memories flashed through my mind. Derek's broken nose, Brad's split lip, Tyler clutching his wrist like a wounded animal. In those moments I had felt calm, controlled, righteous, but in their version I was the monster, a predator unleashed. That night Amani texted me. They're saying you threatened them with a knife. A knife. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my trembling hands. I had never needed a weapon in my life. My body was weapon enough. But how do you prove innocence against lies backed by power? Mom noticed my shaking and sat beside me. She tried to reassure me, her voice warm and steady, but I could see fear flickering behind her eyes. Fear that the system wouldn't see her daughter as a protector, only as a threat. At school the next day, posters appeared in the halls. Violence isn't strength. Expel the problem. The administration called me into the office. Principal Martinez didn't meet my gaze as she spoke. Amara, there have been formal complaints filed against you. Multiple students are alleging physical assault. They're lying, I said, my voice shaking with rage I couldn't contain. They're lying because I fought back. I understand, she said softly, but her eyes told me she didn't. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. But these are serious allegations. The police are involved. You may be facing expulsion or worse. Worse. The word echoed in my skull all day. My club was suspended pending investigation. Students who used to train with me now avoided my eyes, their parents forbidding them from joining anything associated with the violent girl. After school, I walked into the empty gym and stood in the middle of the mat, staring at the scuffed floor where 60 students had once stood tall and fearless. Rage and grief twisted in my chest, like two blades carving me open from the inside. They were trying to erase me, to silence the strength I taught others to find. But I wasn't done. Because if they wanted to play this game in courtrooms and offices, then that's exactly where I'd meet them. Not with fists, not with rage, but with truth sharper than any blade they imagined I carried. I thought Derek's plan to file false charges was the worst he could do, but I was wrong. Because the day after the posters appeared, I got called to the nurse's office. When I walked in, she didn't even look at me, just pointed to the cot in the corner. Lying there was Layla Brown, clutching her stomach, tears streaking down her cheeks. She was attacked in the girls' bathroom, the nurse said flatly. My chest went cold. Later, when Layla could finally speak between sobs, she whispered, They said this is your fault, that if I keep training with you, I'll end up worse. I sat with her until her mom came, and as I watched them walk away, a single thought burned through my mind like acid. They weren't just coming for me anymore. They were coming for everyone I cared about. That night, for the first time, I questioned everything. Was teaching these kids to fight back giving them power, or painting targets on their backs? But then I remembered Layla's eyes the first day she asked me to teach her how desperate she was to feel safe. And I knew one thing with crystal clarity. I couldn't stop now. Because if I did, they wouldn't just take my dignity. They'd take hers too. And I'd rather burn this whole system down than let that happen. They say courtrooms are places where justice lives. But as I sat there, wrists aching from clenching my fists too tight, all I felt was cold. The fluorescent lights above buzzed like angry insects, casting everything in a harsh white glare that made people look waxy and unreal. The room smelled faintly of old carpet and stale coffee. Across the aisle, Derek sat with his father's hand heavy on his shoulder, his lawyer leaning close to whisper rehearsed lies in his ear. Next to him were Brad Matthews and the Riverside Boys, their faces twisted into masks of fake pain and forced innocence. Victims. That's what they called themselves now. The irony burned like acid in my throat. When Derek took the stand, his voice trembled with practiced fear. He painted himself as the good son, the football star who just wanted to study and play and live his perfect suburban life. He spoke about how I attacked him unprovoked, how he was terrified for his life, how he saw me as a ticking bomb ready to explode. His hands shook as he wiped tears from his eyes, his shoulders curling inward like he was shrinking under the weight of my imagined violence. For a moment, I almost believed him myself. Almost. Because that's the thing about abusers, they are masters at becoming the victim in their own stories. Then Ms. Rodriguez stood, calm, collected. She didn't raise her voice or pound the table like lawyers in movies. She didn't need to. She simply pressed play. The original recording of my English class speech filled the courtroom, my words echoing off wood paneling and cheap ceiling tiles. Words about courage, about dignity, about prejudice, and standing up even when your knees shake. Then she played Derek's edited version, a mangled poison tape dripping with hatred. I never spoke. The difference was undeniable. The jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Derek's face went pale, his fingers curling tight around the edge of the witness stand. But Ms. Rodriguez wasn't done. One by one, my classmates took the stand. Marcus Thompson, his voice steady and eyes dark with old anger, told them about 3 years of Derek's reign of terror, about locker shoves and stolen lunches, about threats whispered into ears in the hallway when no teachers were watching. Layla Brown went next, hands trembling, as she recounted being shoved so hard into a locker that her glasses snapped. She listed the names they called her, words so vile the stenographer paused before typing them out. I saw tears spill down her cheeks as she spoke, but her voice never wavered. Then came Imani Reed. She walked to the stand with her head high and eyes blazing with fury that burned hotter than any courtroom light. She told them about the day she saw me stand between Layla and Derek's crew at the bus stop. She didn't attack them, Imani said, her voice echoing through the silent room like a hymn. She protected us, because no one else would. When it was my turn, I stood tall. My palms were sweaty against the wood railing, but my voice didn't shake. My gaze didn't falter. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I said my words slicing through the stale courtroom air like a blade, but I refused to let anyone hurt me again, or the people I care about. If that makes me dangerous, then so be it. The prosecutor tried to twist my words, painting me as violent, unpredictable, a threat to the peace of the school. She called me a ticking time bomb, a menace, a girl with anger issues who belonged behind locked doors. But Miss Rodriguez only smiled faintly, tapping her pen against her legal pad as if each lie was another loose thread she'd pull apart with ease. She spoke softly when she cross-examined Derek, but her words were scalpel sharp. Within 10 minutes, his narrative unraveled like rotten twine. Finally, the judge, a woman with hair streaked silver and tired eyes lined with wisdom, looked down at me over her glasses. She studied me for a long moment, and in that silence my heartbeat thundered against my ribs so hard I thought it might break them. When she spoke, her voice was low but strong. After reviewing all evidence and testimony, this court finds the defendant not guilty on all charges. I closed my eyes. The breath I'd been holding for weeks finally escaped my lungs in a trembling exhale. Relief crashed over me like a breaking wave, leaving my body limp and weightless. Around me, I felt the air shift as the truth settled over the room like a final verdict etched into stone. But as Derek was led away, his father's grip tight on his bruised shoulder, he turned to glare at me. And in his eyes, I didn't see defeat. I saw promise. A dark, twisted promise that this wasn't over. That no matter what the judge declared, he would find another way to break me. Another battlefield to drag me onto. And deep inside, I knew he was right. Because in a world like this, victory isn't a destination. It's just another battlefield. Another day to stand with your fists clenched and your chin up, daring the world to knock you down again. Another chance to look your enemy in the eyes and say, I'm still here. And I'm not afraid of you. Because in that cold courtroom, under buzzing lights and the smell of old carpet and lies, I learned a truth that would carry me forward through every fight to come. Justice isn't given. It's taken. And strength isn't just knowing how to throw a punch. It's knowing how to stand back up, bloodied and bruised, and whisper to yourself, not today. Not ever again. I thought winning the trial meant it was over, that I could finally breathe. But the day after the verdict, Ms. Rodriguez called me into her office, her face pale in a way I'd never seen before. She closed the door quietly and slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos. Grainy surveillance stills of me training students in the gym, sparring with Layla, demonstrating takedowns for Amani. At first, I didn't understand. Then I saw the note paperclipped to the back. Millbrook High Fight Club recruiting violent students to overthrow administration. My stomach dropped. Ms. Rodriguez's voice was tight with fury. These were mailed anonymously to the school board police department and every local news station this morning. I stared at the images, feeling cold sweat bead down my spine. They were framing me again, but this time not just as a thug or a threat, as a domestic terrorist. I could already see the headlines, Black Belt Teen Forms Underground Militia. This wasn't about bullying anymore. This was about erasing me completely, making me so toxic, no school would ever take me again. No college would touch me. No employer would risk hiring the girl who tried to start a violent rebellion. I clenched my fists until my nails cut into my palms. They weren't coming for me with fists or fake tears this time. They were coming with something far more lethal. The truth twisted into a weapon so sharp it could cut out my entire future before I even had a chance to live it. Winning felt nothing like I thought it would. When the judge read, "Not guilty," my classmates erupted in cheers that echoed off the oak panels like thunder. Amani grabbed my shoulders, tears streaming down her fierce face as she whispered, I told you they couldn't break you." Layla wrapped her arms around my waist, hugging me so hard my ribs ached, her quiet sobs shaking through my chest. Ms. Rodriguez squeezed my hand with the strength of someone who'd fought 100 battles in courtrooms just like this. "You did it," she whispered, her voice breaking with relief. But as I stood there soaking in their joy, I didn't feel like I'd won. I felt like a soldier walking off a battlefield littered with bodies I never wanted to see fall. I felt the weight of every bruise and scar, visible and invisible, pressing down on my shoulders, because winning wasn't freedom. It was just proof I could survive another day. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed like lightning in a violent storm. Reporters shoved microphones at my face, their voices shrill and greedy. "Amara, how does it feel to be acquitted? Do you regret using violence? What do you say to parents calling you a danger to the community?" Their words blurred into meaningless noise as adrenaline pulsed through my veins. All I could think about was the folder. Rodriguez showed me earlier pages of screenshots and edited photos from my self-defense club twisted into propaganda pieces warning parents about the violent girl teaching children how to fight. My victory was already being rewritten. The truth was being carved into a shape that fit their narrative. At school the next day, the hallways were electric with whispers. Students I'd never spoken to nodded respectfully as I passed some, reaching out to touch my arm or brush their fingers against my backpack as if courage could rub off like glitter onto their skin. Posters appeared on lockers overnight. "Thank you, Amara, our protector. Real strength fights for others." Their words should have made me proud. But beneath the praise, I felt something colder curling through the air. Fear. Teachers avoided my eyes. Security guards lingered longer in the halls. And Principal Martinez called me into her office before lunch, her hands shaking as she fiddled with her pearl necklace. "We can't allow your club to continue for now," she said, her voice trembling with every syllable, "until the media calms down. We need to protect the school's image." I stared at her, at the perfectly curated, framed photos of smiling students on her office wall, at the plaques for leadership and educational excellence lined up like golden lies behind her desk. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just numbness spreading like frost across my chest. That evening, I lay curled on my bed, scrolling through social media feeds that felt like shards of glass under my thumb. My name trended locally. Some posts called me a hero, the girl who stood up to monsters. Others called me a violent thug, a threat who should be locked up before I hurt someone else's child. Then I saw it, a post shared over 1,000 times. Grainy surveillance photos of me training students in the gym, captioned in bold red letters, "Is Millbrook High harboring a teenage Fight Club terrorist?" My vision blurred with rage and exhaustion. Tears threatened to spill burning hot behind my eyes, but I swallowed them down where no one would ever see. Because tears were weakness. Tears were prey. And I wasn't prey anymore. That night I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling above my bed, the moonlight spilling cold silver across my room like a silent witness. I listened to the distant sound of sirens crying through the city and felt something harden inside me, sharp and unbreakable. I realized something that carved me open from the inside. Winning the trial didn't end anything. It just made the battlefield bigger. Because now they knew I wouldn't break with fists or edited recordings or crocodile tears in courtrooms. So they were coming for the only thing left to take my future. My right to exist without fear. And as I lay there in the dark, feeling my heart beat slow and heavy in my chest, I made myself a promise. If they wanted a villain so badly, I'd give them one. But not the mindless weapon they feared, not the savage they whispered about in crowded hallways. I would become something smarter, colder. A storm that didn't just destroy it, rewrote the world in its wake, because they forgot the first rule of survival: never corner something that knows how to fight back. And the second rule: never mistake a girl who has nothing to lose for someone who can be controlled. They say when you survive the fire, you come out stronger. But no one talks about the burns. No one talks about how, even after the flames die, your skin remembers the heat forever. The smell of smoke clings to your hair. The memory of blistered flesh hums beneath your scars like a warning. Never forget. 2 days after the trial, I walked down the hallways of Millbrook High, feeling like a stranger in my own story. The posters with my name once taped proudly across lockers, "Thank you, Amara, our protector," were torn down overnight, shredded scraps fluttering across the tiles like fallen feathers stripped from a bird mid-flight. Students who once nodded at me with silent respect now turned their heads, their gazes darting away as if eye contact alone might brand them as traitors to the new order. Someone carved killer into the dented metal of my locker deep enough that my fingertips caught on the grooves. Another left a folded note taped to the slits in the door. "Hope you burn for what you've done." The paper smelled faintly of cheap cologne and rage. Amani tried to smile when she saw me between classes. She tucked her curls behind her ears, eyes darting to the shadows pooling between rows of lockers. "People are saying you're planning something, that your club was training kids to riot." Her voice cracked on the last word. She hated saying it, hated believing it. But fear is a disease and it spreads faster than hope ever could. I didn't respond. What could I say? Lies travel faster than truth, and by the time truth arrives, no one wants to hear it anymore. The bell rang overhead like a funeral toll. I watched her walk away, shoulders hunched, her courage folded up and hidden where no one could steal it. That afternoon, I sat alone in the gym staring at the scuffed mats where 60 students once trained side by side, where their laughter echoed against the walls, each strike against the pads a promise. We will never be silent again. Now it was silent, empty, just like the hallways felt, just like I felt. I could still hear the ghosts of their voices in my mind, every count of jab, cross, hook, uppercut dissolving into memory. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the vibration rattling against my thigh like a silent alarm. Ms. Rodriguez, the police reopened the investigation. New evidence submitted. Stay strong. I'll fight this. New evidence. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned bone-white nails biting into the calluses across my palms. They weren't done. They would never be done until I was erased. Not just from Millbrook, from my own life. Because people like Derek, people like his father, they didn't just want me gone. They wanted everyone to forget I ever existed. They wanted my name scraped from every memory, every story, until no one could remember who stood up first. That night, as the streetlights flickered outside my window and headlights swept shadows across my ceiling like ghosts searching for a home, I sat at my desk and wrote a list. Names of every student who came to me for training. Names of every kid who asked me, voice trembling, "Amara, will you teach me to not be afraid?" Next to each name, I wrote one word: safe. My hand trembled as I set down the pen, and I realized something broke inside me that day, something I could never put back together. I wasn't scared anymore. Fear is for those who still hope things will get better, who still believe the world has space for them if they just wait long enough. But I had moved beyond hope. I was done playing by their rules, done trying to fold myself small enough to fit inside a world that was never made to hold me. If they wanted to see me as a villain, I would become something worse. I would become truth with teeth. I would become the hand that pulled the curtains back to show every hidden rot festering in their perfect system, not through violence, but through exposure, strategy, precision, because a punch bruises skin. But truth tears down empires. And as the moon rose full above Millbrook that night, casting cold silver bars across my floor like a cage I no longer believed in, I looked at my reflection in the window eyes, dark, jaw-set face half-shadowed by the night, and for the first time I saw her clearly. Not the girl they wanted me to be. Not the weapon they feared or the threat they branded, but the girl I was always meant to become. The reckoning they never saw coming. I used to think victory meant walking away without scars, that if you fought hard enough, were strong enough, smart enough, you could escape unmarked. But now I know real victory isn't clean. Real victory is carrying your scars like armor, each one proof you survived something designed to break you. Months after the trial, Millbrook felt like a different world. Derek was gone, shipped off to some private military academy states away. Rumors said his father couldn't stand the humiliation of facing the community after everything came out, the tapes, the edited videos, the testimonies of kids he'd silenced for years. The last time I saw Derek was the day he cleaned out his locker. He didn't glare at me, didn't spit curses under his breath. He just looked empty, like someone had cut out whatever was left inside and left a hollow shell behind. Brad Matthews and his Riverside crew didn't fare much better. They were charged with multiple counts of harassment and assault. Their swagger dissolved overnight, replaced by probation meetings, community service hours, and court-mandated counseling sessions. Some lost college scholarships they'd bragged about since freshman year. Some transferred schools to escape the shame. But no one forgot. Their names carried echoes, now reminders of what happens when you build your kingdom on fear. At first, the administration tried to ban my self-defense club, said it promoted violence, said it glorified aggression. But parents who saw their kids come home walking taller, speaking louder, standing stronger, they fought back harder than any punch I'd ever thrown. They flooded board meetings, wrote editorials, threatened lawsuits.